It's a simple story. An anecdote, honestly. I was in high school, my sophomore year. I must have been 15, maybe 16. It's not that important. I couldn't drive. I was online a lot those days, even more than I am now. My parents were on me to get out of the house more. Well, my mom was anyway, and my dad just followed her orders. But I didn't think it was such a bad thing overall. Once you get past the accusatory tone of it, I doubt you'd find too many people that would really object to the idea on principle. So, of course, I obliged them by first burrowing even further into the internet. This was before geocaching had become a mainstream thing. I lived in a pretty small town, pretty far from the nearest big city, and it was still a novel thing to see its name on the internet, even on Craigslist. This was back before the internet was just the real world, when it was a place you went when you sat down in the computer chair and left when you stood up. I can still remember how my heart started racing when I saw the familiar name, realizing that whatever was in the listing would be accessible to me, without a car or without a license to drive one. The two worlds meeting felt dangerous, and when you're that young, all danger feels like it could be just excitement waiting to be tapped. I was walking more and more in those days, expanding the range of my limited little world, bored by then with my familiar immediate surroundings. Consuming the parts of town that had eluded me before, with my short legs and attentive parents and refusal to learn to ride a bike. An undiscovered parking lot, an abandoned video store, anything new was delicious because I was discovering it all on my own. It was an early geocache, essentially. Not that he called it that, or she, whoever posted it. You tended to assume anyone online back then was a he, unless stated otherwise. And anyone who stated otherwise was still looked at with suspicion. Like, if they were really a woman, they wouldn't need to turn to the internet for whatever sort of validation they were seeking. He, the author of the listing that is, instructed hunters to bring a chocolate kiss to leave for him in the box when they found it. I had a pretty good idea where the place was he was describing, and was confident that I could hone in on it by other landmarks once I got closer. I was right. It was in a public park, one of the nice ones near the center of town, with the street lights and walking paths and stone and iron gates. It was a metal box buried by some rocks behind a bench. There was a bottle of dandelion wine inside, with a note saying that if there was wine in the bottle, it meant I was the winner. And that was my reward. The kiss had melted in my pocket, but I left the pile of foil anyways. I went back and checked Craigslist a couple of days later and found the original listing completely gone and deleted. Not a note saying it had been found or anything like that. I couldn't find any trace of it. I had never before really contemplated how closely the guy would have been monitoring the thing. I spent a lot of time sitting, thinking about how I wish I had taken the dandelion wine bottle. It was a cool, older glass bottle, and it's not even like there'd been any instructions not to. I wished I'd had something to hold on to from the experience. The wine didn't even taste that good, but for one reason or another, I had put the bottle back in the box when I replaced it behind the bench. I wonder if it would have been ridiculous to return just for that. I wondered if the box would still be there. It wasn't that long of a walk. A couple of weeks later, I saw another geocache type of post that seemed, from all the details I could remember, very similar to the previous one. Same punctuation and formatting, similar phrasing and wording choices. It was also in my town. This one took me to the outskirts, near the farmland at the edge of town. There was an old stone wall that my grandpa told me dated back to colonial days, running between a housing development and a wide stretch of mostly unplanted fields that went on forever, as far as I was concerned. There was maybe an acre of withered corn stalks, perhaps 100 feet back from the low wall. I walked along it through the loam and dead leaves and crisp grass for about 5 minutes before I saw what I was looking for. It was a big, old oak tree, completely naked. It looked like it had probably been for several seasons. And sure enough, as had been promised, there was a hole in the trunk at about shoulder height. Inside, there was a rolled-up manila envelope. Sometimes I wish I could go back and walk away, not even touch it. Of course, it's impossible. Not just the time travel, but there's no possible version of that moment that doesn't end with my taking the envelope out of the tree. The envelope was why I had walked 3.5 miles out into the middle of nowhere. How far back would you have to go, I often wonder, to reach a decision where I could feasibly have chosen something meaningfully different that wouldn't end with me standing in front of that oak tree? I suppose I just have had to never discover geocaching or Craigslist in the first place. Or somehow have avoided ending up online altogether. And at that point, it seems like it's just down to chance. Or being a completely different person. We move through time into the future like a blind man tapping out ahead with his cane. Except, unless I'm mistaken, they told Adam and Eve what the deal was, right? I mean, I'm no biblical scholar, she says from her office, surrounded by 3.5 walls of books. But there weren't any surprises, at least in my understanding of the narrative. Except maybe that she didn't get away with it, or that God was serious and not bluffing, or that he was really God after all. Because I suppose at a certain point, even if God appears to you, or someone appears to you calling themselves God, there is still a gap in there, an empty space, the distance between two neurons that needs to be bridged with faith, a blind leap. To believe that they are who they say they are. Or maybe she just read ahead into the New Testament and expected a more merciful Yahweh than she got. But the point is, it wasn't as if it was the poison M&M in the bowl experiment. You know, pick the wrong fruit and the buzzer sounds and the game show set shows up around you. She just looked God in the eye and said, bet. Like I said, I'm no Bible expert. Does Eve ever explain herself? Was it 'cause I wanted to? Was there some kind of point she was trying to prove? But how are we, down here, the cast-outs, supposed to know when we're touching the forbidden fruit? Intuition? God's never spoken to me or anyone I know, or if he has, they've never mentioned it around me. There's a certain type that considers him a close personal friend. I suppose, an imaginary pal for grown-ups to wash their consciences clean. But isn't it sad? If man is in God's image, then our modern idea of him basically boils down to Hal's laser red eye on the spaceship, an algorithmic arbiter. He had so much more personality in the books, even on The Simpsons. Maybe he never really wanted to punish us. Maybe he only meant to bluster and posture. But there was just some imperceptible little thing in the way Eve's face looked when she ate the fruit. The hint of a smirk at the corners of her lips, a satisfaction in her eyes, that really just set him off and made him, if God is even capable of such a thing, temporarily lose his mind. That made him feel like she had to get some comeuppance. She knew damn well what she was doing, or he'd be undermining his whole omnipotent shtick. And now we're all grounded. Come to think of it, I've seen teenage girls more defiant in the face of parents who wielded the power to take far more away from them, in their world, than some stinking garden. Once upon a time, I was one myself. Maybe it's one of those stories that makes more sense the longer you think about it, on a scale of years. I always just thought that old people were scared, being closer to death and all. But maybe they've just been thinking about it all a lot longer. I don't know what I did to incur his wrath. Maybe I had a look about me. Maybe I looked like her. I opened up the envelope. There was a red dish towel inside. I pulled it out, and I remember thinking that there was a carrot wrapped inside. Look down at your hand, excluding your thumb and your pinky, of course. Do you think you could tell which finger was which out of context? I still remember the way the wind sounded in those corn stalks. I was holding it in my hand. It had belonged to a man, evidently a rather large man. When I saw the duster a few rows back, the hem fluttering in the breeze. The towel was semi-rigid. It had been soaked. The contents weighed less than I would have thought for something that must have meant so much to its owner. A scarecrow with a jack-o'-lantern head was staring at me from his tea stand amidst the rotten corn and picked cobs. The only unmoved thing as a stronger breeze moved through and bent the stalks around it sideways, caused the leather of his jacket to snap once. My heart stopped for a second. It sounded like an ocean. It wasn't bleeding anymore, so I put the finger back in the envelope and placed the bloody towel back in the tree. I rolled up the envelope and put it in my pocket and took it home. There, I wrapped it in the funny section of the paper, the only part I read, and tucked it toward the back of one of my dresser drawers. I remember eyeing my dad's hands at dinner that night while he cut his food. Not a small man by any means, trying to gauge it. Whoever's finger I found in the tree must have been damn near a giant. I assumed, without even realizing I was doing it, that the owner was dead. But it struck me that night, lying in bed, just as I was about to fall asleep, that hypothetically, it was quite possible for someone to continue living without one of their fingers. I laid awake in my bed for hours, listening so hard my ears hurt, waiting to hear massive footsteps on the stairs outside my bedroom door. When I was 18, I came back from my first semester away at school and stood in my old bedroom and looked around and realized that I had gotten out just in time. I was being slowly pushed out by all of my stuff, like colliding tectonic plates. It came from all corners, built up in layers year over year. My distant youth closest to the wall, in the deepest recesses of drawers and closets. Like tree rings. You can mark the compacted epochs by spelling tests and book reports, trophies and uniforms. After a while, I never thought about the finger very much, and sometimes even forgot that it was there until maybe 6 or 8 months after I found it, which is an eternity to a teenager. Remember, when one morning at school before the bell rang, everyone was talking about how someone had found a finger. I tried eavesdropping on everyone in the cafeteria, everyone in the halls, almost all at once, my heart racing, trying to hear who had found the finger. Were they talking about me? Were people looking at me differently? More than normal? Eventually, I found one of my friends. I could tell from one look at her face that it wasn't me everyone was talking about. She did say I looked pale, though. I still don't remember who had actually found it. The finger, I mean. At least the one everyone was talking about. Someone at another school, I think. Over the next year, the police would find 4 more severed body parts scattered around the county. All of them different origin. 2 more fingers, an ear, and a big toe. All from people reported missing, last seen in or around the area. The cops created a profile. After the second discovery, everyone in town knew that there was a killer. They all began to construct theories. Every weird occurrence or unexplained oddity from the past few years that didn't seem to fit neatly into any other box found a home in their conspiratorial webs. People started locking their doors and buying extra locks. They put a curfew in place. It was hardly needed. At first, people hardly even wanted to leave their houses to go grocery shopping. That summer is as vivid in my memory as the year of the flood when I was 9. Throughout it all, I never had the nerve to pull the finger back out of my drawer, though sometimes, when I was farther from it, I was tempted, as if I would find some clue hidden within it. But whenever I had thought of it while I was in my room, near it, it became hard to breathe. I lived under near constant fear that it would start to smell, but it never did. No killer was ever found or brought to trial. They produced several sketches, but never so much as named a suspect. When the summer died down and several more months passed without any more gruesome discoveries, people started, naturally, to turn their attention to other things. Sometime during the winter, I returned to the tree by the stone wall at the edge of town. I could hardly open that drawer of my dresser anymore, but I felt compelled to return to the site where I'd found it. When the police started finding all of the other body parts, I checked Craigslist and didn't see any familiar-looking listings. I didn't see any geocaches anywhere near us. The crazy part is that if I would have seen one, I now know almost for certain that I would have clicked on it. Maybe that's why the idea filled me with such terror. There were stretches where I checked every day. There was this dread that would hang over me until I opened my laptop and reached the bottom of the page. I can laugh now at the things I told myself, that I'd go to the police, or even tell any of my classmates or friends. I'd have slammed the screen shut in terror, then read the listing 25 more times before bed. I'd spend a week trying to forget about it and only thinking about it more and more, and then finally I'd quietly relent. I'd forget why I was even fighting against myself and stop, turn off my monologue and let my body take over. I'd drift fully conscious in a fugue right to wherever the anonymous internet poster sent me. I don't know. Maybe Eve wasn't crazy. Or maybe I was. But there were no more posts to follow. The pumpkin head was standing beside the old oak in his long coat when I arrived, out in the open. A pumpkin head, at least. His head was just as fresh as the last time I had seen him. I couldn't remember his face well enough to know if the carving was exactly alike. His tea stand was planted less than firmly in the soil, and when a strong wind came, he tottered side to side around its axis, grinning at me. A small group of cawing crows squatting in the higher branches of the tree were apparently unafraid. All of the vinyl-sided houses in the adjacent development seemed more like big hulking sculptures on the landscape than anything that humans might occupy. Their blank beige faces. I couldn't look inside the tree. I thought I would hate myself for going all that way and leaving never knowing. But in truth, when I finally got back home, I felt lighter than I had in months. And after that day, I hardly ever thought of the whole incident again. It's funny how massive episodes of our youth can just sort of fall between the cracks like they never happened, isn't it? A few years after I graduated college, the police announced that they were going to announce a new development in the case regarding the identity of the killer, and then announced that their investigations had concluded that it was an unidentified drifter who spent an extended period passing through the town and then moved on. Likely a white male between the ages of 30 or 50, but potentially as old as 60, or as young as 19. And also potentially Hispanic, or possibly Black. And then my dad died. That was a couple of weeks ago. I went back to go through his stuff and met my mom at the house. She's been living on her own for a few years now, an apartment in the city. They never divorced, but over the years, I guess they became more like friends than lovers. At least to hear her tell it. And they felt living separately was better, now that me and my sister were out of the house. He kept saying he was going to sell it and downsize, but he never did. I don't think he ever intended to. He was always far too nostalgic. He always said he was going to turn my bedroom into an office too. And as far as I could tell, he never touched it. Every fossil was perfectly preserved. My mother never had half a sentimentality. I was ordered to clear out the bedroom by the end of the weekend, keep what I wanted, sell what we could sell, donate what could be donated, and junk the rest. I'm not uncomfortable in my apartment by any means, but I don't necessarily have an entire extra bedroom to take on an extra bedroom's worth of stuff, and I didn't want to just throw it all away. This dig site of my life, which had accumulated in its wake. Maybe I am more like my dad than I let on. At the very least, I would need time to sort through the stuff. And when I was in a more reasonable state of mind, not filling trash bags in my funeral dress. I couldn't do it. I simply couldn't. Not even a matter of would or wouldn't. Right away, I spent 2 hours looking at an old yearbook. It was hopeless stuff. I told my mom so, that she would probably just have to hire some cleaners or junk people or whatever, and I was going to have to drive far away before she did it, or I'd never let them leave with half of it. She sighed. She wasn't happy, but she said fine. So I had one night and one Subaru with a seat that folded down. I bought a bottle of wine and dug a little hole down to my middle school vinyl phase in my portable record player. "There's always storage units," said my mom. "You can go down that road." I knew the look she gave me when she said it. My dad had a storage unit. He assured us long before he died that all he had in there were baseball cards and football helmets. My mom sold it sight unseen. The guy called her back and said, "There's also some golf clubs." She told him to keep them. Just after midnight, I could hear my mother snoring downstairs. I had an empty bottle and a vague notion of a headache. I was already sullenly opining that warm 10 p.m. glow, when the night seems not young, but young enough, young at heart, and complete ease reading old diary entries. The early morning hour was cold. It was like gravel bits ground to chalk on the concrete. I always thought the phrase, nut-cutting time, had a more violent origin than it does. An hour of dreary decisions. Do you really need it? Will you ever look at it again? Will it sell for enough to justify moving it all that way? Mostly no. At some point, I had slipped it into a velvet drawstring bag that one of my necklaces had come in. Still in the newspaper. Even wine drunk, I couldn't bring myself to open it up and look. But it felt light and brittle, like it was only bones. Even less could I bring myself to throw it away. And of course, it could not be left to be found by my mother or some stranger. I threw it in the glove compartment of the Subaru. Now once again, it is nearing midnight, another unhappy and sleepless hour. The grandfather clock is the loudest thing in my office. It belonged to him, to my dad, from his dad, brought, allegedly, from Germany. I know there's nobody out there, but somehow recording this, talking like this, makes me feel a little better. A little less alone, I guess. There's a record of what happens here tonight, a third party, bearing witness if what? If that scarecrow has somehow managed to survive or assemble himself all these years later, and he really is standing outside my door. If the bitter drifter is curled up somewhere in my garage, back in town after all these years, waiting for me to go to sleep, to debut his second chapter. If there's a giant man in the garden, outside the window, leaving boot prints 4 inches deep in the mud. It's sitting in my desk drawer as I speak to you now, right here. But you can't really be here with me, can you? You can only ever be out there, in the future, in some other place than here in this office with me. It's only an image of you that I have in my head to keep me comfort. A trust that someone will listen to this someday. But what can even that give me, really, at the end of the day? A hope for justice? As if these chimeras in my imagination could be dragged into court, Even if it is the killer, in flesh and blood, having tracked me down, hiding nearby, listening to me. Gosh, it all becomes so silly when you try to imagine it. When I lay it out like that, but dampening his breathing, listening to me speak right now, every last word. Even if it was him, when I'm being honest with myself, what hope would I have when nobody he killed before me has received their piece of justice yet? It's been more than a decade. Not a very warm mental blanket for this cold, late hour. The air is thinner or something. It's harder to imagine sunny daytime delusions. You certainly can't save me. And yet, I keep talking to you. Why? Jesus, I can't tell myself that was only a leaf scraping the patio anymore. It was too heavy. It sounded too intentional. It sounded like feet, like boot leather. Or husk? All of a sudden, I realize how ridiculous I sound. When I imagine you listening, if not comfort, thank you for providing me some levity, perspective. And truly, a sentient jack-o'-lantern is about as realistic a possibility as either of the other options I laid out. I think there really must be a reason that we sleep through the nights. There are hours we weren't meant to see. These thoughts meant to be contained to dreams. I'm seeing them through the wrong lens, like looking backwards through binoculars. The night air wreaks havoc on an unprotected mind. I can't stop looking at the drawer in my desk. No sense lying about it. I'm not sure I could even form a sentence about anything else at the moment. Gosh. Like it's sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Still wrapped in that same funny section. It just now occurs to me, isn't that funny? Not very ha-ha funny, I guess. But wouldn't it be amusing to read the comic strips after all these years? Something just creaked. Up in the attic just now. I've heard the stories. Vagrants living in the cupboards, the cellars, in the walls, for months, years. A noise on the porch just a second ago, like the scuff of a boot. My mother did mention about coming up to see me soon, one of these weekends. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea, of course. She'd have called, and besides... But it wouldn't hurt to call her, I suppose, although it is pretty late. What if she's out there on the porch and her phone is dead? Oh, God. Maybe it was a tree. The wind. A shadow, some big sort of shadow just moved across the window. I saw it on the wall, the corner of your eye. It's not as good with the other stuff, but it sees movement like a bitch. 'Cause we're prey. We're prey animals at heart. Our eyes should be on the sides of our heads. There it is again. I see... Yes, I think... Just a tree branch, indeed. Just like I thought. Ha! Like I said, the air, the night air, what did they used to call it? The humors? Vapors? There's something about it. Late at night, it infects the mind. Sends it back to the steaming jungles, the first vertebrates to crawl into dry land. Reminds you what a farce all of this is. The drywall and the books, the dim, pathetic little Tiffany lamps. We have to put up these tchotchkes and tokens to pretend we don't still belong to that jungle. It doesn't still surround us, that we aren't still and eternally just washed up on that shore, gasping for air, waiting for the shadow of some giant bird of prey to pass over us.
Hi, this is Jill. Please leave your name and number, and I will call you back.
Now she's going to ask why I was calling her at midnight. And yet, I can't simply go to sleep. Not a chance. I couldn't even leave my office, in fact. In fact, my office door now looks as heavy and as terrible as my desk drawer. I can't take my eyes from it. I'm not entirely sure how long this has been the case. Minutes, maybe, but... Boy, I'm going to feel ridiculous listening back to this tomorrow. I've got the couch in here, of course, but it's facing the door and... Yeah, I can't even shut my eyes. Even 5-10 seconds, it becomes unbearable. I stop talking to you and I remember that I'm all alone. I have no earthly idea why the office door should move in this moment. And yet there is some phantom but equally weighted portion of my mind which is just as absolutely assured that any second now I'm going to see the door handle start to turn. So you see, how could I close my eyes? Not even 12:30, what a cruel, endless night this is. The type of night where weeks pass. Meanwhile, the most meaningful moments in life are gone before you even know they're happening. I suppose most other nights I've felt this way, it's been due to illness, some physical illness. Up puking at all hours, can't sleep for pain, or a weird sleep schedule from the meds. Feeling like you're holding on to a plank of driftwood in a storm, gritting your teeth till morning. I suppose I should be grateful not to be sick, although that sushi I ate for dinner is sitting a bit weird. Maybe that's it. What did Dickens say? More gravy than the grave about you? Ha! Feeling like